afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to raise GMAT reading comprehension. My name is Raja Sudana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be a main host today. Supporting me in this webinar are two of my team members. The first one is Harsha, who's a director of subject matter expert at e-GMAT. Harsha just joined e-GMAT a couple of months back, and he's going to make sure that for those of you who are e-GMAT students, your learning gets enhanced every day that you learn. And then we have Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert. And for those of you who've interacted with Sandeep, he's the one who's responsible to make sure that you guys have the right study plans and that you're focusing on the right things at the right time while studying while preparing for the GMAT. Now, in this webinar, we're going to talk about how to use GMAT RC. And a lot of people, when they think about reading comprehension, regardless of whether it's connected to the GMAT or the GRE or any other test, they think of it as something which only voracious readers can do well, and they feel that if you're not a great reader, if you're not in the habit of reading, then you probably will not be able to ace GMAT RC. In this webinar, we're going to dispel that myth. We're going to talk about a few key reading strategies. We're going to apply those few reading strategies, and we're going to really show how, if you apply them, understanding what an RC passage is about, especially a GMAT RC passage, which is about a lot of substance, it becomes really easy. And also, if you know those things, you don't really need to be familiar with a certain domain, although it does help if you are, but you don't need to be. Why? Because those reading strategies help you in comprehending the passage. Now, one of the few concepts that you need to know when it comes to GMAT RC is how do you go about figuring out the main point or the main idea of the passage. And to make sure that you're prepared for that, we did send a few video lessons your way. They were on main point 1 and 2. If you've not gone through these video lessons, go through them. Post this webinar. These video lessons are a part of your free trial. We also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free proctored super mock, I'd say a free proctored super mock, which is tomorrow. And this is focused just on quant. So in this webinar, we're going to really take a mock test, which is going to be live, and we're going to tell you what your current score is likely to be, and B, we're going to tell you which are the 2 or 3 areas that you need to work on. And then the third thing that we're going to tell you is what kind of habits are you not following, or what bad habits do you have because of which your score is what it is? I mean, are you not inferring information from the passage? Are you not considering all cases when it comes to solving a data sufficiency question? Are you not visualizing the information that's given to you in the question stem, and so on and so forth? So for those of you who need help with GMAT Quant, this is one workshop that's going to help you get there. And then we also have a critical reasoning webinar, which is a week from now, very similar to today's webinar. In the critical reasoning webinar, we're going to talk about pre-thinking, which is a key skill if you want to ace GMAT critical reasoning. And in this, we're going to talk about what that is, and we're going to talk about a unified way to pre-think for every assumption question. So again, for those of you who haven't registered, just make sure you go through this. Okay, with that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. I'm going to put in a few poll questions here. I have about 300 students here in the webinar. The first question is, when do you plan to take the GMAT? The second one is, which round do you plan to apply in? And then the third one is, what's your current ability level? And again, as you see the responses to these questions, you can really see how the makeup of this group is. All right. Now, with regards to when do people plan to take the GMAT, most of you have more than 60 days before, or rather, almost most of you, it's about 50% of you have more than 60 days before you take the test, which means two things. One is, hey, you have a significant amount of time to cause a major improvement. If you want to improve by, for example, 200 points, that's very possible you can do that. And the second thing, which is when I look at the second one, which round, but 57% of you plan to apply in round 1, which means that if you have more than 60 days before the test, you probably should actually be taking the test in about 70-75 days or so if you want to apply in round 1, because that starts in September. And if you want to apply in September, you should be done with your GMAT by early August or so. Okay. Let me just hide this over here. Essentially, about 22% of you want to apply in R2, and then there are a few, about a significant number who are looking at beyond R2, which is Jan of 2021. With regards to current ability level in RC, you can see we have a fairly big distribution in the less than 40 percentile, 40 to 50 percentile, and 50 to 60. For those of you who are in that, I want you to tell me how do you feel about GMAT RC post this webinar, and then we have a few folks who are at greater than 80 percentile. And for those of you who don't know your RC ability, when we go on the next screen, ask this question, and Sandeep would be happy to provide a link to our mock test, which will help you get there. And then let's kind of ask a couple of more questions. They are, what's your target GMAT score? And then I think it's pertinent that I ask this question again as to what's the impact of the COVID crisis on your decision to do an MBA. So all right, target GMAT score 42% in the 730 to 750 bracket, 760 plus is about 25%, 710, 720 that's about 20%, and then about 14% or about 15% if you are in the 600 to 700 bracket. With regards to what has COVID-19 crisis done, it's pushed a significant number of you towards doing an MBA. Very few of you have said that it's made you reconsider. Now, there's it should reconsider, not reconsider. Again, it shows when you create a response, when you create a poll in a hurried fashion, that's what happens. But essentially, what it again, this is a biased group. Why? Because we are here, which means you are interested. So I think there aren't that many people. But what it shows is there is a significant number of people who are doing an MBA because of the COVID-19 crisis. Which, by the way, also leads to a very interesting inference, which is where let's go into our presentation pane. So now what you are in is a presentation pane. You should be seeing reading comprehension. Let me just put in a yes, no poll. If you see reading comprehension where you see author's opinion, main point, and so on and so forth, then select yes. Good, most of you can see that. All right. So with many more people considering to do an MBA this time, the need for a higher GMAT score has actually it's pertinent that you get a higher GMAT score than what you would have aimed for last year, just because R1 of 2021 is going to be more competitive than R1. So R1 of 2020 is going to be way more competitive than R1 of 2019. Okay. So why is it? There are three reasons. One is if you look at the trend that's been going on, B schools are now looking for that score of 730 or higher, and essentially you should aim for that score of 730 or higher. Yeah, despite it being more competitive, because it can get you an ROI of about $500,000 or so. Why? Because hey, if you want to go to a top B school, you need that score. The second is if you are looking for a scholarship, which I think you should given the current environment, a good chunk of the scholarship money goes to people who get to that score of 730 or higher. And the last piece is when you look at the difference in total earnings over a 10-year period, and when I said difference, it's for graduates or students graduating from our tier 1 schools versus those graduating from tier 2 schools. That delta is over a 10-year period is about $500,000, and it's the highest that it has ever been. And my hypothesis is this delta is gonna get even higher. So I'm gonna just share some data to back these three claims up. But overall, these 30 points can lead to about $500,000 worth of delta over here. And just to really share some of this data, median scores at top B schools have been going up. What you see in this table is a trend over the last 5 years. And what you don't see in this table is you don't see any Kellogg or you don't see any Harvard or Stanford. Why? Because even in 2014, they were at 730 score. And if you look at the stats, you're going to really see that this trend across schools. It's not just these schools. And this is despite a decline in GMAT test taking population across these years. Now, This year, we expect to see an increase. So you can really see that need for a higher GMAT score go up. And this trend is not limited. So whatever happens in the top 25, actually the 26 to 50 at school, they actually follow the same trend. And here you can see certain schools where you've seen the highest jump in median GMAT scores, and you see the black dots are the schools that are not in the top 25, and you can see the jumps over there are significant. Now, this was some statistical data. I'm going to now share some anecdotal data of a few of our students, and all of this data is actually, or all of these use cases, each of them is on our YouTube channel, and many more. So it's not just limited to this. We have about 100+ interviews on our YouTube channel, and these are unedited interviews that you can go and watch. So Nishant scored 690, was rejected by a bunch of schools, improved his GMAT score to 740, not only got admission, but got multiple fellowships. Is currently graduating from Columbia. Pravi, with a 680, applied to many schools, did not get a single interview invite. 5 hours before the schools were slated to send the last of interview invites, she updated her GMAT score to 740. Didn't even apply again, just updated her GMAT score, got 5 interview invites, got multiple fellowships, and she just graduated from Kellogg. KK Krishnakant scored a 680, was rejected by every school, scored a 720, got multiple full fellowships. These are full rides, not just a $50,000 scholarship, but 130, 140K. So, but bottom line is, it comes to your GMAT score and its impact on admissions and scholarship. It's very important than it has ever been. And with that, let's kind of go into that scholarship piece over here. And for those of you who don't know, USB schools award about $350 million worth of scholarship money. European B schools add another 50 million to the pie. And based on our estimates, we deal with about 10,000 paying students every year. And e-GMAT get about $45 million worth of scholarship money based on our recent estimates. But 50% of this scholarship money, give or take, goes to people who score 740 or higher, and about 80% of it goes to people who score 710 or higher. Which means if you get to a score of 740, that's kind of the average scholarship money if you apply properly. And there are 2 factors that decide your scholarship. One is your GMAT score. The second is your likability during the interview. Here's some more anecdotal data. So Mansi, one of our former students, graduating from Harvard, she scored a 770. She got $90,000 from Harvard. Victor, again, scored a 770, got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. And Kong Bui scored a 760. Not only got a full ride from Ohio Fisher and 5 other schools, but he was paid $1,700 per month as stipend to study at Ohio Fisher. And again, we saw these examples prior to this. Do you have to apply to get a scholarship? No, you don't. You don't. Schools give you a scholarship. Most of this is merit-based money, so you don't have to do special application. There are certain scholarships for which you need to do, and our blog lists those scholarships out. But 80 to 90% of all scholarship money is merit-based, so you don't even have to apply. Schools just give it to you if they feel that they want you. Here's another case of one of our former students who's currently studying at Columbia. He scored a 710, interviewed with these schools. He was waitlisted. He reached out to these schools and said, hey, I think we connected really well. I think I had a really great interview. So what went wrong? Schools told him, you need to get a higher GMAT score. He improved his GMAT score, got a 750, just updated his GMAT score, didn't even apply again. The same schools that waitlisted him admitted him with scholarships. He has, I think, about $80,000 worth of total scholarship money from Columbia right now. And again, you can go to our YouTube channel to see more of these. And here's a quote by John Fuller, who is a former admissions director at Rush. He says, someone with a 770 is way more likely to get a financial reward, or think of it as scholarship or fellowships. Why? Because the school wants to buy that high GMAT score. The third reason, the difference in total earnings, probably the most ignored reason overall. And what I'm going to do over here is compare 2 schools. One is Babson, the second one is MIT. Both these schools are based in Boston, about 20 miles away. Arguably, students graduating from these schools actually have access to similar set of opportunities. And when you think about the base salary, the median salary that students get who graduate from these schools. What you see is it's a delta of about $40,000 despite having access to similar opportunities. When you look at the average bonus, it adds another 20 grand to it. So overall, median starting year one compensation, the delta is about 60 grand. Even if you really take that delta across 10 years to be about 45 grand, it still leads to about $450,000. Now the kicker here is when I graduated, and I graduated from Babson about 13 years ago, this delta wasn't this high. I mean, the delta in these median salaries over here between this and this was merely $20,000. This delta has been, growing, and it's likely to grow even further in the next year or so. Okay, with that, so here's some motivation for you to get to that score of 730 or higher. With that, let's go right into GMAT RC. If you want to get to that score of 730 or higher or 740 or higher, you should aim for that 90th percentile ability. Why? Because that makes things a lot easier. So let's talk about your current approach to GMAT RC. So why don't you tell us how you approach GMAT RC today? And let me put in a short answer poll over here. And I want you to tell me, when you see an RC passage, what is the first thing that you do? What is the second thing that you do? And so on and so forth. Okay, I want to see a few more responses before I broadcast the responses. So if you're typing in and hitting enter, I am getting that, even though you can't see that over here. And please do not put the responses in the Q&A part. It's a short answer part that's there for responses. I have about 30 responses. Let me start broadcasting. Okay, first thing, read passage and try to answer questions. Skim through the passage, read text, look for possible answers over here. Okay. All right. So some of you skim through the passage, others essentially read the passage, and some just read the questions first. I mean, there are three different approaches to acing GMAT RC overall. Now, here's another question that I want to have over here, and this is you evaluating yourself, and so this is where I think it's really important to understand how honestly you evaluate yourself. The question is, what level of understanding do you have today before you start answering questions? So it's your self-evaluation, and you want to ace the GMAT, having that ability to evaluate yourself properly is really important. Why? Because if you evaluate yourself properly, you focus on the right things. You focus on the right things. Acing GMAT RC or acing GMAT in general is a piece of cake. 3, 2, and 1. All right, let me broadcast the results and end the poll. What you see is, what the hell happened? I'm sorry, can you guys put this again? For some reason, there seems to be a glitch over here. Can you put those responses again? I want to see about 200 responses. I have about 375 people here in the webinar. So about 75, between 75 and 90, 43% of you say that. 50 and 75, 41% of you say that. And less than 50, that's about 15% of you. Now, it's really important when you get multiple data points to correlate them and with prior data points. And when I look at data, which he said when I asked the question, what's your ability level in GMAT RC, and about 40% of the class was below 60 percentile level, and then another 30% did not know their RC ability. And when I see 40% of you are in that 75 to 90%, what it tells me is you think you've gotten to know the RC passage way more. I mean, way more if you think that you know most of what's there in a passage than you actually do. So we're going to really see that. And I'm going to ask this question again to really say, and remember this response. So at the end of the webinar, I'm going to ask this question again and say, hey, prior to starting this webinar, what level of understanding do you think you had when you read an RC passage? Okay, so remember this response over. So my goal over here is to help you ace GMAT RC, and essentially what I want you to do is I want to make sure that I convert you into an active reader. And so a lot of people read the passage and they read it in a passive fashion. Why? Because they say, I'm going to increase my focus once I get to the questions. But that's, if you do that, that's a losing strategy to when it comes to GMAT RC. Or in fact, it's a losing strategy in any context of the GMAT, whether it's SCCR, Quant, or so on and so forth. So I'm going to tell you how do you get the maximum out of the passage, and to do that, I'm going to introduce certain reading strategies. I'm going to demonstrate these strategies through a small passage, a set of small passages actually. Then I'm going to tell you how do you use that information to answer questions, and I'm going to demonstrate that in these small passages using an inference and a main point question. And then we're going to take a full-length RC passage, an official passage, a difficult official passage, and we're going to apply this again. And we're going to really see, as you do that, passages that the OG deems as difficult actually start to become very easy. Okay. But whatever I'm going to tell you, it's going to be useless if you do not do one thing, which is change your attitude towards GMAT RC. So with regards to this, let's kind of get some data point here. When you see a reading comprehension passage, what does your brain tell you? When you see an RC passage, what does your brain tell you? Okay, you have to understand, there's a lot of information. Read it quickly, it's long, don't understand the info, difficult. I am dead. Okay, I like that. That's a good response. So, oh God. So I think those responses like oh God or excited or this is what I'm looking for, which is because it tells you your attitude towards an RC. And the first thing that you need to do to ace GMAT RC, regardless of what strategies I tell you, is you have to have the attitude of getting immersed in the passage, and that's really important if you want to ace GMAT RC. Why? Because if you don't have that attitude to get immersed in the passage, you will not be an active reader. And that's the first thing you've got to tell your brain. Why? Because contrary to what you think, GMAT RC is probably the easiest way to improve your verbal score as well as your GMAT score. There are very few concepts in reading comprehension. It's primarily about good habit, and RC passage is an opportunity to get 4 questions right. It's an opportunity, depending on where that passage is, to add up to 30 points to your GMAT score. And frankly, if on the test you can spend 8 minutes and add 30 points to your GMAT score, I would do it. Okay. And the attitude needs to be, hey, if I answer these 4 questions correctly, it'll help me get towards that 750 score. It'll help me get towards that dream B school and potentially tens of thousands of dollars of scholarship money. Okay. And again, I can't tell you how much you need to adopt this attitude overall. But you need to do that. The second thing you need to do is you need to start to visualize, which is you need to understand. You need to think like an author when it comes to reading in GMAT RC, and you need to understand author's intent as you're reading GMAT RC. Don't read it as you. Read it as if you are the author and you're reading it as the author to figure out what's the intent that the author is trying to communicate. And if you do that, and if you read an RC with that attitude, you're going to find that every GMAT RC question is simple. It's a piece of cake. Okay. Now, how many RCs you typically get in the verbal section? About 4. You're going to get about 4 RCs. Statistically, it gets too long and too short. But again, statistics might not apply to you if you're doing really well or if you're doing really poorly. So statistics are purely, a median. Statistically, the likely score that you get on the GMAT is 580, but no one over here is going to be happy with that score. So, but yeah, typically it's going to be 4 passages. The length, I think, would vary depending on how well you're doing. Okay. Now, once you have this attitude going in, I can then tell you how to read an RC passage well. And the key to that is reading strategies. And we're going to just talk about 3 simple reading strategies in this passage. 3 reading strategies, very simple to understand, but challenging to apply. Why? Because we as humans are kind of immune to change. We don't like change, but those of us who do change are the ones who actually go and do something in life. So what are the three reading strategies we're going to talk about? The first reading strategy that we're going to talk about is, as you're reading, read slowly. As you read a sentence in a paragraph, understand the structure of that sentence. Break it down so that you understand what you're reading. So this is something that you do at a sentence level. The second is use keywords, and using keywords, you can predict what the author is going to talk about. And why is that useful? It's useful because if you can predict what the author is going to talk about, as you read that next sentence, even though it may use some complex constructs that you may not be familiar with, but because you know the direction in which the author is going, you should be able to map it and in that visualization that we talked about. And then the third thing, which is there, is periodically summarize what you've just read and kind of think about what else could the author talk about. So 1 and 2 are, if you're willing, are very easy to get to. 3 requires that you start to do this on about 10 passages, and when you do it, but with every passage that you do this on, you get much better. And by the time you reach 6th, 7th, 8th passage, you're going to be able to really just predict what the author is going to talk about with 90% accuracy or so. And when you start doing that, that's when you'd be able to essentially get to that 90th percentile level in GMAT RC. Okay. And that's when the time to read an RC passage would go down tremendously. Sai says, how much time do we ideally need to do these 3 steps in? And the answer is, in the first 10 passages, you might even take 10 minutes to read a passage. But what you're going to find is, as you start using this more and more, that 10 minutes would come down to about 2 minutes. And that's the beauty of this. Why? Because with keywords, you'd be able to really say, hey, this is what the sentence is going to talk about, which means the need to go to that sentence and to that word level will go down. As you apply these strategies, you're going to, as you read a certain contextual word, which is really important, that the meaning of it would automatically be translated in your brain, and which means that, again, you would not spend a ton of time reading the passage. Remember, ask yourself, why do I take time? And the reason you take time is because you see text which is unfamiliar to you, and when it's unfamiliar, you kind of read slowly. But if you increase that familiarity level by understanding the constructs, by understanding the keywords, the time to read something goes down tremendously. So, sentence level, paragraph level, as within the paragraph as well as amongst paragraphs. Simran says, can you tell me how to read a short versus a long passage? Short versus a long passage are just constructs. The strategies do not change. Okay, so let's kind of look at this with some examples. All right. So anyone who tells us here's a strategy to read a long passage or a short passage, they're just trying to give you tricks which are not universal. So the way to finishing GMAT RC quickly is to apply these strategies slowly. If the slower you are, the faster you're going to finish GMAT RC. And I'm going to tell you why as we do some examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to give you a small paragraph, a small passage as we're going to call it. And I'm going to give you about a minute to read this. This is very, very small over here. Here is the passage. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to select yes when you think you are done. All right, last 15 seconds, guys. And now I'm going to ask you, what's the level of understanding you think you have of this passage? Short passage over here. All right, let's get to this. Perfect. That's really great. So what I'm going to do now, next I'm going to present one question on this passage. And I don't want to time you, so I want you guys to select still solving over here. So I want at least 150 people to select still solving. That way, as you choose another answer choice other than still solving, I would know that that you essentially have chosen your answer, and I'll call time. So that way, I won't time you. As a group, you yourself would time you. So 150 people to say still solving. I only see 90, 130, 130, 140 or so have said still solving. Let's get to 150. Good. So here is the question. All right, about 80% of you are done. Let's get those responses in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. So what you see over here is, choice D really popular, the most popular choice, and then choices A, B, and C. B and C specifically are also very popular. So let's kind of go about reading this passage and then solving this question. All right. So I'm going to move this out over here, and let's read this passage. So the author says, bordering on one extreme, and let me just go over here. One definition of ethnocentrism considers it a schismatic blah, 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 blah. So let's just pause over here. So one of the things that, as I read the passage, you should look at and really say, hey, where is it that I'm pausing? Why? Because it's really important to know when to read and summarize this. Now, when you look at this, and let me just put in my short answer poll over here. What's the purpose? Why did the author really say bordering on one extreme over here? To present a viewpoint. Okay, he's contrasting. All right. It's one of the extreme definitions. So it says this is one of the extreme definitions. This is an edge case, as you may call it. And then he says one definition of ethnocentrism considers it a schismatic in-group out-group differentiation. Now, when you look at this and you really say, to be clear that there are multiple definitions, there could be at least two, but there could be more than two as well. All right. Now, whose viewpoint are we talking about? One definition of ethnocentrism. Is it the author's viewpoint over here, or is it someone else's viewpoint? It's a general viewpoint. It is not the author's viewpoint. It may not be the author's viewpoint, but based on this, what we know is it is someone else's viewpoint. So even before you move forward, these things should go on in your brain to really say, hey, it's an extreme definition A, and B, it's one of the definitions of EC. Okay, And the author may or may not believe with it. So it's not the author's definition, it is an extreme definition. In which, so let's kind of look at what does in-group out-group differentiation means, in which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group are correlated with a state of hostility towards out-group. And what are out-groups? The comma which tells you that this is describing the out-groups, which are often perceived as subhuman and or incorporation of evil. For those of you who've done sentence correction, you can really see how a single sentence, by the way, over here in this entire paragraph, you can really see how as you learn modifiers in GMAT RC, you can apply them over here in while reading an RC passage and really see what it refers to. Okay, so overall, there's what the author says is there's an exaggerated definition and of EC. And what is EC as per this definition? Some differentiation in which love for your own people is linked with hatred towards outside people. So essentially, if I were to summarize this paragraph, I would say it over here, the author presents one definition of EC, then he indicates that the definition is a bit exaggerated, and then as per this definition, the following two things are correlated. One is love for your own people. The second is essentially hatred for evil. How many of you, when you read this passage, and let me just put in a yes/no poll over here. How many of you got all these three things when you read this passage? Chirag says, why is the definition exaggerated? Because of this phrase, bordering on the extreme. Bordering on the extreme means it goes towards exaggeration. It's an extreme definition. Good question, Chirag. All right. So about 30% of you got all of this. Now let's kind of look at which answer choice is correct. Okay. Okay. Let's go over here. Let's look at choice A. And with that, let me just put in a poll question over here to really see how did people poll in this particular for this particular question. Okay, so choice A, but about 24 of you chose, but 8.79% says to criticize a concept that encourages hostility towards outgroup, towards people not belonging to the group. So does the author say this definition is bad? The answer to that is no. The author doesn't say that this definition is bad, because of which I would look at this and I would reject this particular answer choice. Okay. The second thing is EC doesn't encourage hostility, and that's really, really important. When you look at this, what he really says is this is a definition of EC. It doesn't mean that EC encourages out this. Okay, and that's really important. And can you see the distinction over here? Can you, when you look at the passage, can you understand the distinction with that definition being there and something encouraging something? Okay. What is the no for? The difference. Okay, got it. So let's kind of look at the passage over here once again. Let's go back and look at the passage. If you look at this passage, what the author says is one definition of EC considers it a in-group out-group differentiation, okay, in which this are correlated with a state of hostility towards out-group. So what does correlation mean? What does the word correlation mean? They are related, but does it mean that one causes the other? Does it mean that one causes the other? No, it doesn't mean that. So do you know, so can you really say that EC encourages hostility? If they're considered to be correlated, can you say that EC encourages hostility? No, you can't. And that's one thing that answer choices play on, your ability to understand these three terms which we actually had over here. So the three terms which are really important when it comes to GMAT CR and RC. In fact, they're actually even tested on SC in many ways. Um, uh, the one is coincidence. What does this mean? It means that two events happen together. Okay, so what you have over here is, what does it mean, and then do they happen together? Is there a direct connection? Does one lead to the other? Okay, so if they are coincident, it means they happen together. It doesn't mean that they have a direct connection. They could not. Doesn't mean that one causes the other. If they're correlated, it means they're connected. It means that there is a direct connection between them. It doesn't mean that they happen together. Okay, it doesn't mean that one causes the other. All right, and that's really important. And causality, which is the strongest kind of connection between two, means that one causes the other, which means there's a direct connection. They may not happen together, by the way, but one causes the other. That's really, really important. So which means both these columns need to be checked. Are the terms clear? And this is really, really important for you to understand in overall in terms of GMAT verbal. And now you can really see why you say that it doesn't, based on the information in the passage, we can't say that EC encourages hostility. Okay, so I'm going to share this PDF. An example of correlated but not causal in real life. Let me just think about it. But let me just first finish this, and then by the end of this, I'm going to really come up with an example. All right. So in this case, author presents a definition of EC, says his view on his definition, but he doesn't really criticize that concept over here. So the criticism is wrong. The encouraging of hostility is wrong. Why? Because there's no causal connection over here. Now let's go and bring those polls over here, and choice B, again, twice as many people chose choice B. Let's go to choice B. Choice B really says to evaluate the concept of EC. What does the word evaluate mean? When you evaluate something, what do you do? When you evaluate something, what do you do? You look at the pros and cons. You make a judgment on it, right? You look at the pros and cons and you make a judgment on it. Okay. Does the author talk about the pros and cons of EC, or does the author give a judgment on it? No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that at all. And because of which, all right, this option choice is incorrect. He just presents some features of it, and based on one definition. Let's look at choice C. All right. Again, the question is still, what's the main point? Choice C says to define the concept of EC which leads to hierarchy among social groups. All right. Now, it's wrong on two counts. One is the author presents a definition and it's not his definition. So he doesn't define the concept of EC. Remember this, to define the concept means that it is author's definition. All right. And if the author were to define, then the author would write something like this. EC is a situation in which blah 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 blah. If the author says something like this, or EC is defined as X, Y, and Z, he's not defining it himself. He's presenting a definition which is very different from defining a definition. Okay, and that's where whose viewpoint is expressed in the passage is really important overall. Okay, And he doesn't mention hierarchy among social groups, by the way. So there's no mention of hierarchy on both these counts because this is wrong, this is wrong, choice C is wrong as well. And again, you can really see about 75 of you mark choice C. Okay. And then choice D, which is the correct answer, it says that, hey, the author introduces the concept of VC. He gives you a definition, so he does introduce the concept of VC, and then he presents a view on it. What is the view? That concept, that definition is bordering on one extreme. Okay. Yeah, to introduce to present would be to present from his standpoint, to introduce us, to really tell, hey, this is one way of doing it. All right. And that's where one of the things that's really important is to, when you look at it with regards to GMAT RC, a lot of you were talking about timing over here, and this is something which is going to become more and more apparent. When you read slowly, you focus on understanding the meaning of words. And when you understand that meaning of those meanings, and when you read more and more of GMAT RC using this methodology, a lot of those meanings start to come up automatically. And that's when your reading speed goes up. So if you want to read quickly, don't focus on reading quickly, focus on understanding. The more you focus on understanding, the faster you would comprehend, the more you would really learn. Indra says, how do we know whose definition? We don't know whose, but we know it's not authors because it says bordering on an extreme, one definition. It says one definition. It doesn't say EC is defined as, or my definition of EC, Indra. So. All right. Do you need to read out the entire option even though the first few words determine that that's not the option? No, Sai, you don't. Okay. But my job over here is to make sure that you know for all the reasons why an answer choice is incorrect. Why? Because in some other option, the first part might be correct, the second part might still be wrong. Remember, this is a learning session. So on the actual test, no. But while you're learning, you need to find out all the reasons why something is wrong, because that's what true learning is all about. And that's a great question, Sai. Why? Because it brings about a really good point, which is what's the difference in the learning mode of studying versus the exam mode of studying, which is when you're taking a mock test. In the learning mode of studying, you're maximizing your knowledge gain. In the exam mode of studying, you're using that knowledge to maximize that score. Anonymous says, how does one track time while reading slowly? One would not want to be slow. So is there any threshold? No, you don't. You don't track your time. Why? Because your speed is an outcome. All right. Your speed is an outcome. It's not the cause. If you focus on improving comprehension, speed will happen automatically. Okay. Abhinav says, I got stuck at schismatic, not knowing the meaning of that. I lost track of summaries. Thank you. I'm glad you asked this question. I'm going to actually go back to the passage, or I'm going to really see if I can bring the passage over here. I think I have it in the notes pane. Where is my P1? Okay, let me just see. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to just get the passage over here. The question, it's a really good question, which is, hey, how do you figure out the meaning of schismatic? And this is the word schismatic over here. So the key thing is in GMAT RC, especially in difficult RC passages, there may be some instances in which you may see a word which is not so simple. And in this case, knowing the keywords and understanding the context becomes really important. Why? Because you have to trust the test maker. a test maker understands that about 70% of the test takers are not native speakers of English language, and because that is the case, the on the test you're not going to get something which is uber difficult. So it's not the GRE, by the way. And then the second thing which is there is that even if you see a difficult word which you can't understand the meaning of, you would be able to infer the meaning of it. And when I read this, I didn't know the meaning of schismatic. It's not a common word, but I said it could be a systematic, is how I read it, and because of the context around it. Can you explain how to distinguish between the general view and the author's view? The author's view really says, okay, let's say Google is considered a good buy. Google is a good buy. So if I say what this is 1, then this is 2. Which one is author's view? Which one is someone else's view? Both of them are there as a part of RC passage. Which one is author's view? Which one is someone else's view? Yeah, 2 is author's view. Okay, and 1 is someone else's. The author is merely presenting that. Okay, and that's really important. Does that help you answer that, Shekhar? All right, and that's really important. And when you do GMAT RC well, one of the things that you're going to really find is when you watch news, you're going to figure out how much they actually can lie without being implicated for it. Why? Because they can present someone else's view, and that view could be completely wrong, and essentially they can get away with it. Okay, so for those of you who are in the US, when our president says someone told me X, Y, and Z, he is completely getting away with it with whatever he says. Why? Because he cannot be essentially held accountable for it, because he said someone just told me X, Y, Z happened. All right. We use those 3 strategies. We're going to really do that in another one. So don't worry, we're going to continue doing that. Now that you've learned how to do one versus the other, let's and kind of go into our second question over here. And here's question 2. I want you to read this and tell me yay versus nay once you've read this passage. All right, everyone's done. So I'm going to put in my second question over here. Here is the second question. Let me remove broadcast results. All right, pretty much everyone is done. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. And I'm going to broadcast the results. So this example, this passage is a classical example of, again, it takes that piece as to how should you read a passage, which part is what the author says, and which part is what someone else is saying. So it takes that to what I call as another level. Before I start reading this passage, I'm going to bring in my short answer pod over here, and I'm going to give you a very simple example. Essentially, where is my short answer poll? And I want you to tell me which one can you infer. When you say the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on moods of people, what can you infer from this? Is it some people regard, so one, some people regard color blue as soothing, or two, the color blue is soothing? So which one can you infer, 1 or 2? 3, 2, and 1. Let me broadcast results, and you can really say pretty much everyone is saying that you can infer just one from it. Why? Because some people regard. Because why? Because the author is saying the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on moods of people. The author doesn't say that's my opinion that the color blue has a soothing effect. It's saying it's considered to have a soothing effect. All right, so let's kind of look at how to read this. And some of you are saying, man, I felt 2 answer choices were correct. You would feel that if you're not reading the passage properly. Now remember, it's an inference question. Inference question is a question in which what you have to answer is, what is it that the author would agree with? What does the author believe in? Not any other piece. Okay. So EC and its canonical variants are deemed as considered to be intimately connected with XB. So whenever you see long words, you should essentially just compress them. All right, are intimately connected with XB. So some people consider EC and its variants to be connected with XB. And what is XB? A complex sentiment system sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, and antagonism. Again, I'm exaggerating, but I mean it's even difficult for me to read. Vis-a-vis a stranger or the alien, and everything that the stranger or alien represents. Now, the first part over here, I'm going to really say this is part 1, and this part, which I'm going to underline now, a complex attitude in everything that the stranger represents. All right. What's the difference between, or from a point of view, between the first part and the second part? And I want you to understand that. What's the difference between the first part and the second part? Second part is author's idea. The first part is someone else's viewpoint. And again, whenever you're confused about it, the best way to do this is to take a simple example. Okay, the best way to do this is to take a really simple example, and let me get in my notes over here. Okay, so the best, so say we go to the same example. So in this, when you look at this part, Google, an internet company, or the top internet company, whatever I could put in over here, this is something that the author is saying, but whether it's a good buy or not is something that the author might not agree with. But what the author is telling you as a fact is that Google is an internet company. All right. So the second part is what the author is telling you from his standpoint, what XP is, and the first part is what some people consider. Okay, and that's really important when it comes to interpreting what the author is telling you. And what is XP? It's hatred for aliens. And then the author really says again, some sociocultural anthropologists even consider XP and EC to be opposite sides of the same coin. Again, the author is saying, I'm not saying that some anthropologists consider XP and EC to be the opposite sides of the same coin, but again, so but is a contrast word. A few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Again, this part over here is also not author's viewpoint. So in this second sentence over here, the author presents viewpoints of two different groups. None of these is going to be his viewpoint. All right. So when you think about what the author tells you, the only thing the author says, hey, I believe in is this definition of what XP is, which is its hatred for aliens. Everything else is what someone else is saying, and the author merely is mentioning that. When you read this, how many of you got this level of distinction in the passage? How many of you were able to distinguish this as you read this? Because if you were able to do this, you should have been able to answer the question correctly. But half of you did, the other half did not. Jess says, is it true that the inference cannot be located in the text literally? By definition, that's there, but that's not what the test will ever, what you ever be worried about in the test. Okay, if something's literally stated in the passage and the author believes in it, and if that is what's stated in the answer choices, you should mark it as correct. Okay, but I have not seen a single instance of that happening, and that's not how the test is going to trick you. Okay, so just don't worry about that part. So the question is it true that an inference cannot be located in the text literally? By definition, yes, but it doesn't happen. So if in an RC passage, if the author states something that he believes in, you're not going to find that stated in the answer choices. If you do find that stated in the answer choices, tick it, because that cannot be wrong. But you're not going to find that, because I've researched every RC option and every RC passage that is out there, and have not found even a single instance of that. Okay. So what's going on in this passage? The author defines a new term, which is XP. The author says some consider that XP and EC are closely connected, and some experts think that XP and EC coexist, but some other experts think it's otherwise. Okay. So again, this is an inference question. So what's an inference question? It is always from the point of view of the author, what the author would believe with 100% certainty. Okay. If author hasn't given an opinion on something, you can't infer that. All right. And if there are facts that are stated in the passage, the author agrees with them. All right. So a passage from the fact, which is what some of you asked, it can be a correct inference. It's really important to know what an inference is. It's not just an inference in the context of GMAT RC, but the same thing applies to CR. The same thing applies to inference anywhere in the world. Okay. So let's kind of look at all the options. You have the passage over here. The first option says xenophobia and EC are different facets of the same concept. All right. Now, this is stated in the passage. Let me just get any poll questions over here. But is this something that the author believes in? The answer to that is no. The author doesn't believe in that. And the author, I mean, if you think about it, the author doesn't agree or disagree with this view. For those of you who chose choice A, and there were about 33 of you, is that clear why choice A is wrong? Okay. Those of you are saying no, and please don't use a negation text max and inference, but for those of you who are saying no, please tell me why you're saying no. The choice is XB and EC are different facets of the same concept. And what the passage says is EC and its canonical variants are considered to be intimately connected. Does the author believe they're intimately connected? No, they're not. The author doesn't believe that. It's considered to be. It's the same thing as When you say blue is considered to be soothing, does it mean that the author believes in it? No. Can you infer that? No. Okay, can I show the previous slide about inference? Here is the previous slide about inference. It's always from the point of view of the author, and if there are certain facts that are stated, then they can be a part of that inference. And some of you said, how can that be the case? Because an inference is something that the author would agree with given the information in the passage. That's the definition of inference. For those of you who really say, hey, an inference cannot be stated in the passage, yes, ideally it should not be. But the base definition is that, hey, what is it that the author would agree with given the information in the passage? And yes, I've checked through all the passages. Remember, e-GMAT is the only company in the world where we have 50 people who work full-time on helping you as the GMAT. Most companies won't even have 10 people full-time over there. Okay. So yes, we scour through everything which is there in the official questions. All right. Choice B says the canonical variants of EC are closely related with xenophobia. Again, along the lines of this is not what the author believes in. The author presents information, but the author doesn't believe in it. It's a deemed view. It's a considered view. And this view is not what author, again, believes in. All right. 78 of you chose this. Can you really see why this is correct? Why this is incorrect? It's someone else's view. And again, these are core skills that you're learning. When we solve a full-length RC passage very soon, you're going to really see why they're so important. All right. Let's go to the choices C, D, and E. All right. Choice C, very few people chose this, and it makes sense. Why? Because no one, it's not mentioned by as anyone's view over here that XB and EC are not connected with each other. Well, it is mentioned in the last line. It's the view of some experts, and the author again doesn't agree or disagree with this. All right. Choice D says in some cases XB could be the cause of EC. All right. The cause and effect relationship is not there. There's no cause and effect relationship of that's been presented over here. And XB choice E, which is the correct answer, which about 28% of you have chosen. XB entails dislike towards the strange. That is something which the author has presented as a fact, a complex attitude cum sentiment structure involving A, B, and C. This is a definition that the author has presented himself. So yes, you can infer this. Okay. So that's why choice E is the correct answer. Jess says, can you say, because other GMAT programs say that inference cannot be located in the text, and it must be 100% true with no possibility of being wrong. Yes. So Jess, an inference is something that given the information in the passage must be 100% true. All right. Now, by definition of inference in general, what we believe in, it should not be located in the text. All right. But I have not seen a single, that's not how the test is going to trick you. What I'm trying to tell you is, and let me put in my notes pane over here. You will not get in any instance. So in an inference question, let me just start with, in an inference question, and whether this is in RC or CR, all right, you will not be in a situation where there is a factual passage and that is repeated in the answer choice. And you have to determine whether that is correct or not. In any official passage, that is not the case. You will not get that. You will not be in such a scenario. It just hasn't happened. It doesn't happen because the core definition of inference is, given the information in the passage, what must be true. All right. Doesn't really say in the core definition that you shouldn't be able to read that out from the passage. No, that's something which is kind of an extended definition, but the basic definition is this: given the information of the passage, what must be true and what is it that the author believes to be true. Does that help? Yes, it is the case here. Factual info is presented, yes. Oh, it's not confusing. If the author considers something to be correct and it's there in the answer choices, you just mark it. That's basically it. What's so confusing about it? I think what you have is confusing. Why? Because you have to make an additional decision. Is that something that's stated in the passage, or is that something that I have to infer? No, don't worry about it. If the author considers it to be correct, it is correct. Okay. That's basically it. All right. So with that, what have we learned so far that we're going to take forward? What have we learned so far? How to understand an RC? Inference must be author's view. You've got to read slowly. You've got to figure out who's saying what. All right. So now we're going to read this and apply this to a full and start passage. All right. We're going to do that and apply this to a full length passage overall. And so this says, why do we have to only infer only author's view and nobody else's view? Okay, that's a great question. And Sudesh says, and let me just put in a poll over here. And it's a really good question. And I'm surprised no one else has asked this question. So let me put this question here. And I want you to tell me why do that's his question. Why do you think that is the case? How many of you think? It's a really good question, by the way. And I mean, I knew the answer prior to this, but I had not formally thought about this. But the moment he asked this question, I kind of really said, okay, I know why this has to be the case, because I use this in my daily life. Okay, because the author has written the passage. What does it have to do with business? I want to ask this question. What does this have to do with an MBA and business? And when you think about anything in the context of the GMAT, you should really think of why is it there and how does it help you become a better manager? How does it help you become a better manager? Okay. And don't say just because that's how the GMAT is, because the GMAT is the world's most logical test. Most tests are trying to become like the GMAT. All right. Ownership, that's good. So let me just tell you something. Okay. So at e-GMAT, we're evaluating a new personalization product, which will help us build more and more personalization in there. And I asked two of the people who work at e-GMAT to evaluate it and to evaluate about three options and tell us which one should we go with. Now, they are the author of that report, and 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 essentially, I need to be able to, when I read that report and I'm reading it, they don't present it to me. I first read it. I need to be able to distinguish what is it that they believe in and what is it that they're put in as viewpoints of others that they may not have verified. Why? Because hey, if you give someone 5 days to write to do some research and figure out, you can't figure everything out. You're going to really say this is what we believe in, this is my evaluation and my beliefs, but here is what other people say. And the ability to distinguish that is really important in any leader or any boss or any manager. Why? Because essentially then you can really say this is what these guys are saying and this is what they've also mentioned, which is there for my information to consider, but they have not verified it, they don't stand by it. And that's something which is really important. Has this, for those, pretty much everyone over here is working. There are a few people who are still in college. But for those of you who are working professionals and who present report or who read someone else's report, being able to distinguish that, isn't that really important? Right? When you see a report, to figure out, hey, what is the person who's written the report, what does he believe in? And what is it that he's presenting as, hey, Gartner has said this, or Frost and Sullivan has said this. And the ability to distinguish that is what every manager should have. And which is why this aspect is there in GMAT RC. Okay. Everything that's there in GMAT RC is because of a reason. GMAT SC, for example, it's not a test of grammar. I mean, if you think about it, Larry Ellison or Sundar Pichai, they're not the best grammarians out there, but they are the best communicators. GMAT SC is a test of your ability to communicate. Okay, so with that, let's look at a full-length passage, and I'm going to, once you're done with this, reading this, I'm going to give you about 4 to 5 minutes to read this. You can select yes as soon as you're done reading this. I'm not going to broadcast results, but select yes as soon as you're done reading this. 4 to 5 minutes. So I have about 90 people who've said yes. I'm going to give you about a minute or so more. So all right, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And so I'm going to give you 5 questions, one after the other, and I'm going to give you again a minute and a half for each of these questions. But you still have access to the passage. So here's your first question over here. Right, last 5 seconds. Let's get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. And by the way, I'm gonna end the poll, broadcast the results, and you guys seem to be doing well. I'm glad. This is a 700 level passage. I'm going to actually share the passage with you on a different pod. So here is the question stem. Here's the question, and I'm going to put the passage in. Just give me 1 second. All right, I have about 200 responses. Let's get the answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcast the results to see, that we have a split jury, but I mean, more and more people are gravitated towards choice A here. Here is my question number 3. Let me remove broadcast results. Get this over here. And here is the question. All right, guys, last 5 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. And you can really see people did, I think, really well for this one. Let me get in your question number 4. Here is Q4. I'm going to just make sure that the poll doesn't cover the passage. Here is Q4. And sorry, once again, let me make sure that the poll doesn't cover the passage. Hold on. I'm sorry about that, Harsha. I know you're trying to adjust this. All right, guys, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You guys have done well. Let me broadcast the results and the poll and see 65% of you chose choice D, which is really good. And then let's get to the last question for this passage. This is, again, as I say, this is a difficult passage, by the way. It's considered a 700 level passage. It's an official passage. And here is the last question. All right, guys, get those answers in. Another 15 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to hide this over here so we have a bit more real estate space. Broadcast the results, and you can see here we have a bit of a split jury. Let's kind of look at this one later on. So There were a couple of very interesting questions as you guys did this, and I'm going to address those there because they were generic. That's why we didn't answer them in the Q&A pod. But before that, how did you feel about this? I mean, could you see that what we did in the early part of the webinar was applicable in this passage? I mean, the things that we focused on, that they were applicable over here. Also, could you really see that as you answered questions, you had more clarity with regards to what's right versus what's wrong? Some of you think this is an easy passage. Yes. So it wasn't. This was a 700 level passage, and this is an official passage. The first two were e-GMAT passages. Okay. Now, here's something that a lot of people really talk about, and they say, hey, when you do more reading, it helps you do better in GMAT RC, and they really say, hey, read blindly and read novels and read XYZ and so on and so forth. How many of you have heard this? Because I got a couple of questions. Say, hey, if you want to do well in GMAT RC, read all the time, and heard and have done both. And some of you have done it and have not seen that improvement. Now, this is kind of a cup half full kind of a thing. So it's not wrong. It's not just, but just that plain advice isn't completely right as well. And I'll tell you why. As we read this passage, you're going to find that when it comes to GMAT RC, it's written with a very specific purpose in mind. The sentence structures that you see over here, the keywords that you see over here, the distinction between what the author is trying to say versus what someone else is trying to really say versus just the pure facts that the author believes are correct. That distinction is absolutely clear. I mean, that's why to write a GMAT RC passage takes a lot of skill. The connectivity between paragraphs is very, very clear overall. And so essentially what I'm trying to say is there are certain quality standards, very, very strict quality standards that when it comes to GMAT RC, they adhere to. Now, if you blindly read, if you, for example, read, if you're from India, if you read the Hindustan Times or the Indian Times, or for that matter, if you read many local dailies over here, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, if I read AZ Times or AZ Republic, they don't adhere to those standards because again, they're not required to, but certain journals do. So if, for example, if you're reading The Economist, they do adhere to such standards because they want to be truthful. They want to be clear about what someone else is saying and what they've done research on. Certain opinion columns on the New York Times, they actually adhere to such standards. So reading those with the point of view of these keywords, with the point of view of understanding that structure is really important. However, blindly reading stuff is not going to help you. Blindly reading stuff is actually going to make you go away from appreciating the beauty that's there in GMAT RC passages. So yes, it's true, but true with certain caveats in place. Okay. So The Economist, the magazine is beautiful. You should read that. But again, when you read that, apply these reading strategies. Certain opinion columns on NY Times as well as Wall Street Journal, they're good. They're very, very well written. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes, there are digital versions available for all of these. Bloomberg Business Week, no, I do not consider Bloomberg Business Week to be in the same class. No. So yeah, it's not free. Spend some time. It's $1 for a week for a lot. Harvard Business Review is an example of this. It's just that the topics which you find in Harvard Business Review, you won't get the same variety of topics. Okay, Harvard Business Review is there. If you are from India, then the only paper that I would partially recommend, and again, partially with a very heavy heart that I would recommend, is the Hindu. But again, I would rather that you don't read it. Yes, I would not be editorial. But again, I would recommend read The Economist. I mean, that's the best. It's an international magazine. It has multiple editions. Why with a very heavy heart? Okay, that's a really good question. Because even when you read the Hindu, which by the way is probably the best among Indian newspapers with regards to its journalism, with regards to the quality, uh, 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 the sentence structures over there are not as precise. They just can't be. I mean, overall, the way they use verb ing modifiers, it's not going to be as precise over here. Do not go for TOI or the Economic Times. All right, please don't do that. The Economist, you can pretty much read anything. So The Economist is really good. Okay. Not the Economic Times, no. All right. Novels are not written with such standards. Again, remember, a novel is a story. Let's go towards answers. Okay. The only two that I recommend, the three that I recommend, once again, The Economist, New York Times opinion section, Wall Street Journal opinion sections. Okay. Let's go here and let's try and apply this. So FNM assert that medical research could be improved by a move towards larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatments. So the first thing which usually says, hey, it's someone else's assertion, it's not what the author is saying. FNM assert, per FNM, medical research can be improved towards larger, simpler trials. Okay, then let's look at the second line. Second line is the author says, currently researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. Okay, just if you pause over here, what's the distinction between first and second line? What's the distinction between this part and this part and this part and this part? The second line is author's view. The first line is someone else's view. That is correct. Currently, researchers collect far more information on patients than is strictly required, and then the author really tells you the comparison. Substantially more than hospitals collect. Thereby, what is thereby over here? What is thereby over here? It's a conclusion, it's an outcome resulting. That's good. Henceforth, thereby escalating costs of data collection, storage, and data analysis. So when you think about this, when you're reading this over here, and you see certain keywords, okay, currently means current practice. Thereby means because of this, there is an outcome. Even before you read what's after thereby, your brain should automatically tell you. You should be so used to the structure of quality writing that their brain should automatically tell you, after this, I'm going to really see an outcome of a lot of data collection. And this is what I mean by the quality of editorial that you have, which is what you have in The Economist and New York Times and so on and so forth, but in not in other journals. Okay. Then the author says, although. What is although? Although means a contrast word. It means it could mean that going in another direction. Limiting information could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to the study. This part is also what the author says, okay, I agree that this could happen. Okay, FNM contained, again, the author is giving credit to FNM, contend that such risk, never entirely eliminable from research, would still be small in most studies. So FNM say, hey, such risk never entirely eliminable would still be small. So here is a case where the author is crediting FNM. But then again, when you look at this only in research on entirely new treatments or new and unexpected variables likely to arise. Only is a very important keyword. Why is only a very important keyword? Why is only a very important keyword? Okay. It limits the scope, exception, that's good. But beyond that, why? Yes, but why is, I'm not talking about in passage, but your brain should send you an alert when you see the word only, or uh, 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 it's an extreme, yes. So the reason why you should really just see the word where your brain should send you an alert when you see the word only or see the word just is because only leads to inferences automatically. it leads to what we call as, automatic inferences. When I say let's get over here, let's see if I can make the font size bigger. Okay, when I say this statement, only people who score 700 or higher get into Harvard, what I'm saying is we can automatically infer that if you score 600, you will not get into Harvard. So it means, again, if you didn't graduate from IIT, you would not get into Harvard. Again, only gives you that ability to infer. And when you see only in an RC or NSCR passage, just really say, hey, there's an automatic inference that's there. But also really say all Harvard students have a score of 700 plus. That's good. Who said that? Brian. Yes. So when you see the words only, just, fastest. So when you say Ron is the fastest, Ron is the fastest runner in his class. So what can you infer from this? What can you infer from this statement? A single statement can have multiple inferences. If you've gone through the e-GMAT inference module, you've seen examples of that. He's number one. There's no one like him. Everyone, so if say John, you can infer John. No one's faster than Ron. John is not faster than Ron. Right? He's not as fast as Ron. Yes. No one is faster than Ron. So, but here the scope is limited to only 2 people. No, not really. The class can have 50 people. Only fastest, yes. So again, my point really is the moment you see the word only, your brain should give you a signal. When you see the word just, your brain should give you a signal. And it's really important to recognize these words overall. Okay, and you can really see the moment you start getting into the habit of doing that, your speed increases. Do we have a list of such words? Yes, in our inference module in the CR course, we have a list of such words. The thing which I'm talking about only, Max, is where, hey, in general, what does only let you do? Okay, only in research of entirely new treatments are new and unexpected variables likely to arrive. What the author is saying is there could be tens of different treatments. Okay, there could be tens of different kinds of treatments, but only for entirely new treatments, only for the class of treatments that belong to this entirely new treatments, are new and unexpected variables likely to arise. All right. So that's something which is important. All right. So currently there's too much data that is collected. Data is way more than what hospitals collect, and that it leads to increase in cost. And there are certain negatives of collecting data. They said there is a possibility that if you collect less data, you might lose some pieces of information. But the author really says, hey, such risk can't be removed entirely anyway, and that risk is small, with the exception of the fact that if you look at entirely new treatments and research for entirely new treatments, are new and unexpected variables likely to arise. So with that exception in mind, for every other kind of research, that risk is fairly minimal. So with that, what he really says, hey, the author is explaining the benefits of simpler trial as per FNM. Okay, and the author seems to agree with it because there are certain points that that he adds to it. All right. Then let's move towards this. And then the author says, in the second paragraph, FM says, the FNM proposed not only that researchers limit data collection. Okay, now let's say you stop over here at not only. What does not only mean when you see not only in a statement? What does that mean? What is more than one suggestion? Okay, continuation. Who said continuation? That is the best thing. Some may not. That's correct. Absolutely. So when you see not only, yes, you're right that there can be more than one thing. But when you see not only, you also see but also, which means that you're continuing the chain of thought. So when you go from one paragraph to another, one of the things that you've got to figure out is the author going to go in a different mode? Is the author going to continue the chain of thought? And there are certain words which tell you about continuing the chain of thought. Words such as in addition, not only, but also. All right. And there's a certain list of words that you can really look at that will talk about continuing that chain of thought. It's really important that you have that list of words with you. All right. Additionally, we'll do that. Furthermore, moreover, in addition, we've already talked about. Likewise, we'll do something like that. Okay. And if you know these words, if you see these words, and in GMAT RC passages, you will see these words. Even before you before you understand the content of the statements, you know there's going to be continuing chain of thought. And who's saying transition words? You must be an e-GMAT student. That's great. Not only that researchers limit data collection on individual patients, but also that researchers enroll more patients in clinical trials, thereby, again, the outcome over here, another keyword, obtaining a more representative sample of total population with the disease under study. Okay, so that's good. What the author is really saying is, hey, there's a second suggestion that FNM give. That hey, in addition to collecting less data, you also increase the size of the trial. All right, and you get more representative sample of the total population. Okay. Currently, studies, let's kind of look at this. Often researchers restrict participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. So it says, hey, this is what happens currently. All right. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. So currently what happens? The studies include patients with only one disease at trial. These are what we call as ideal conditions. All right. And once the treatment, it's a two-step process. So once the treatment passes these ideal conditions, it's then tested for normal conditions. So essentially, when you think about this, there's a second proposal by FNM over here. And what is that proposal? Larger trial. And the author explains the benefits of larger trial over here. Okay. Then let's move forward. Then there is the continuing chain of thought over here. The author says, broadening the range of trial participants, FNM suggests, again, it's not the author's suggestion, it's FNM, broadening the range of trial participants would enable researchers to evaluate a treatment's efficacy under various conditions and for diverse patients under various conditions, and to evaluate its effectiveness for different patient subgroups. So what's going to happen? If you increase the size of the trial, you'll be able to judge the efficacy for different subgroups. And then the author gives an example. He says the value of a treatment for a progressive disease may vary according to the patient's stage of disease, patient's age. He gives you two conditions under which may also affect a treatment's efficacy over here. So what you can really say is, given this, as you can infer, that per FNM, ideal and normal conditions, right? that the two steps may not be needed if you consider a larger trial. All right. So now you've read the passage over here. Now let's kind of go forward. When you think about it, let's kind of do what we call as a paragraph summaries as to what's going on. The proposal to improve medical research, okay, and in two ways. One is simpler trials, where you collect less data and there's not much risk in collecting less data. It'll reduce the cost. And the current scenario, how what's done is explain where we're collecting way more data. Then the second proposal to improve clinical trials is you take larger trials. Actually, let me just go back. Um, and essentially you put in a more representative sample of total population under trial, and it'll reduce the need to do a two-step trial, and there are certain examples that are presented. So at a very high level, this is what the entire passage does. Okay, everyone's with me right now? Yes, no? Okay, what is the difficulty that this will fall under? It's a 700 level passage. As I said, this is a difficult passage. So let's look at let's look at all the questions over there. What's the main point of the passage? The main point of the passage, let's kind of look at this. Overall, we have a proposal to improve medical research, and one of them is benefits of doing a simpler trial. The second is benefits of doing a larger trial. So what I go about with regards to my main point is in two ways how medical research or clinical trials can be or medical trials can be improved. That's kind of what I go with and go into the answer choices. And as I go into the answer choices, let's kind of look at this. Okay. Now, let's look at this over here, and let me go to get your poll questions in. Over here, I'm going to move this part out, and I'm going to put this over here. Now, you guys did really well on this one. You guys chose choice D. Choice D is the correct answer. Majority of you chose choice D. The choices that you were most often confused with were choices C, okay, and choices C and E. All right. Now, choice C is talking about evaluating. The moment you see the word evaluating over here, you should really say, hey, both pros and cons, and a judgment that the author really believes in is passed over here. Now, when you think about this, are the pros and cons of something present of the current way, current medical research presented? Are the pros and cons of current medical research presented? No, there are no pros of current medical research, by the way. The second thing, for those of you who are saying yes, what are the pros of current medical research? The second thing you have to ask yourself is that why the author has written the passage? Is the author primarily talking about the shortcomings and he's evaluating the certain shortcomings, whether they're truly shortcomings or not? Let me just do this. Evaluating and analysis of certain shortcomings. Okay. Let me kind of get there. Evaluating and analysis of certain shortcomings. This is a classical case. If you're confused over here, you didn't understand this. So what this means is, hey, that there is an analysis It means that there's an analysis of shortcomings that is there, that's already been done, and the author is presenting an opinion on it, whether that analysis is correct. Okay, and by putting in the pros and cons. Is the author doing that in this passage? When you say evaluating an analysis of certain shortcomings. Evaluating what? An analysis of what? Certain shortcomings. And no, the author isn't doing that. The author isn't doing that. There is no analysis of shortcomings that is present, and the author is not evaluating that analysis. This is kind of a three-level statement in these 6 words over here. Okay, so when you read an answer choice, you have to understand what that answer choice is trying to say. And if you don't understand that, then you probably would not be able to figure out, or you won't be able to evaluate whether that answer choice is correct. So which is why choice C is wrong. There are about 24 of you who chose choice C over here. Okay, now let's look at choice E. Let's kind of talk about this part. Do we know that these trials are likely to change in this manner? Yes and no. Do we know that such trials are likely to change in this manner? No, we don't know that. This part is wrong, which makes choice E wrong. Okay. Now, do we also know how medical researchers have traditionally conducted trials? We know some aspects in this, but not all aspects, or not many aspects over here. This passage is truly written from what F&M proposes 2 changes. Okay. All right. Now, when you look at choice D, which is our correct answer, which about 60% of you have chosen, describing proposed changes. Wrong annotation, I'm sorry. Describing proposed changes to ways in which clinical trials are conducted. There's a proposal that is there, and which is F&M, and the author is describing what that proposal is, and which is what makes choice D the correct answer. Okay. Okay. When you look at choice B, we'll look at B and A again, don't worry. B says describing aspects that tend to drive up costs. Now, one of the things that's there in the main point is it has to be discussed across the passage. This thing is only discussed in para A, okay? And so it's not the entire scope of the passage, and hence choice B is incorrect. Okay. Now, in choice A, the author does identify 2 practices, right? But the purpose is not to explain those practices, all right? And the second thing is, those practices do not affect the accuracy of trials. I mean, we're not talking about how these practices affect the accuracy of trials. We are trying to make trials more efficient with what the proposed changes are. Okay, and you have these things over here in all of this. So when you get the PDF, you're going to be able to read this as well. For those of you who said choice A, and very few of you chose choice A, I'm really glad about that. You can really see why choice A is incorrect. We don't want to make the trials more accurate. Remember, the first aspect, we're collecting less data to reduce cost. In the second aspect, we are instead of making it a 2-step process, we are just making it a 1-step process. And again, it's about efficiency, not accuracy. Okay. All right, let's go to question number 2. Okay, let's go to choice A. And again, please don't put the questions over here. This is not a question that everyone has, Paparna. But describing proposed changes. What does describing proposed changes mean, Aparna? Since you put the question over here, what does describing proposed changes mean? Does it mean that the author is proposing it? No, it's describing the proposal. All right. It doesn't mean that the author is doing that. Our author is making the proposal. If you're making this error, you're making an error in CR, the same error in CR. You're making, you will have many issues with boldface questions, Aparna. This is a classical sign. Again, when you see an error, this means when you read a sentence, you can't infer what's being said in that sentence when the complexity of a sentence increases beyond a certain point. And here there are no difficult words, but it's a two-level sentence. It's not a simple sentence. So if you're an e-GMAT student, go to the master comprehension course. Understand what various fragments mean. So go read the master comprehension course and understand the roles played by various fragments. Okay. So let's look at question number 2. Let me present the poll for question number 2 over here. Here's question number 2. Here's how you guys chose. Choice A was really popular. Let's see the content of the question. Question says, what can be inferred from the passage about a study of category of patients in the line often researchers, which is in second paragraph, by the way. Often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments beside these. So what will the author believe in about this group of patients? Okay, what can be inferred about these studies? And it's only the patients that are selected are those who have no ailments besides those being selected. Okay, let's kind of look at the text over here. Often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments beside those. A treatment successful under these conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. Okay, so essentially, this is what the author is saying. Author is telling you as his thing. So it's a two-step process. What the author is saying is this part of is that the results of such a study where only these people are there, they're limited, which is why they have to be evaluated again under normal conditions. Okay, so the inference from that is that the results are not broadly applicable. Okay, so the correct choice, as many of you have selected, is choice A, that the results are very limited or they have limited applicability. Now, choice B, practically no one has chose this. Why? Because expense is not talked about in this context. It was there in the first paragraph. But 8 of you have chosen choice A, or choice B, I'm sorry, B for boy. You've kind of mixed what's there in first paragraph with the second paragraph. Again, you can see the causality when you choose a certain choice, what it tells us. You're mixing information over there. All right. C says it would be the best way, it's a superlative word over here, to sample total population of potential patients. Actually, it's the opposite. It's not the best way. It's actually a very limiting way as per the passage. All right. Choice D again mixes paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. It says it would allow researchers to limit information collection without the risk that important variables can be overlooked. We talk about this in paragraph 1, not in paragraph 2. Again, you're mixing information. Choice E again mixes this, which says its findings would be more accurate if the concerned treatments, if it concerned treatments for a progressive disease than if it concerned it for a non-progressive. Again, progressive versus non-progressive, not talked about in this context. It's talked about in the context of enrolling a wide variety of participants. Okay, and choice E again, you can really see this. Okay. Now let's look at question 3. Let's see how is it that you guys polled in question 3. Here is how you guys polled. 62% of you got this right, if I remember the answer over here. Choice, he says, it can be, again, it's another inference question, and you guys are getting inference questions right. That's great. It can be inferred from the passage that a study limited to patients like those, the same set, would have the following advantages. So what kind of advantages would it have over the study proposed by FNM? And if we do our pre-thinking in this, we would have to reduce what you can really say is that, hey, the number of steps would go down. That's something that I know, and its findings will have a broader applicability. All right. So what's the advantage of essentially current way of doing studies to over enrolling a broader array of patients? A, 2 steps would be reduced to 1. The second is the applicability will be more. All right. Everyone with me so far? Yes, no? All right, good. So as I said, let's kind of see whether it would yield more data on its findings. Yes. Oh, sorry. I am sorry. I'm sorry. My bad over here. I did it completely opposite. Sorry about that. It's the opposite. Yes. So the question really says, and the question is over here, man. When you get 2 hours into the session, that's what happens to you. We have to figure out the advantage of findings where you restrict the study participants to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied, not the other way around. Man, sorry about that. Who got that? Abhinav, yes, thank you. It's the opposite. Abhinav said that, yes. So if you study those patients who really have no ailments beyond the ailment that's being studied, then you'd not have to consider the variables of age or the progressive nature of the disease. So essentially, you'd have to consider fewer number of variables, which is what choice C says. 62% of you got it right. I was like, how can 62% of my class get this wrong? No, that can't happen. So all right. So I'm going to look at all the other options. It'll yield more data and its findings would be more accurate. Accuracy, we don't care. It's not discussed. We're not saying this is either way is going to be more accurate. If you think about if you infer information from the passage, accuracy is not discussed. Overall cost in the longer term, it's actually not discussed in this context over here. Okay, limiting the number of variables is what we have inferred, which is the correct answer. Choice D is actually just the opposite. It's the advantage of the proposed study, which is where I was going, and my apologies for that. And I want to thank Abhinav for telling me that. And then choice C, it will enable researchers to assess the value of an experimental treatment for an average patient. What's an average patient over here? What is an average patient? We don't know, right? Because the study in question only considers patients who have that particular ailment, right? That's not an average patient. Okay, average patient is a very vague definition. We don't have a definition of an average patient over here, and hence that's why this one is incorrect. All right. So again, in each of the 3 questions, what you've really seen is only the option that is absolutely correct is correct. If you understand the passage, if you read the question statements properly, you get to the answer very, very with a lot of certainty, and that's something which is a takeaway that you should have. Spend more time early on. Next is a purpose question. It says the author mentions, I'm going to read the questions more carefully now. The author mentions patients' ages may also affect their treatment's efficacy. Why? Why does the author mention patients' age? Because it says here's one of the ways in which, when you enroll a broad range of patients, you can really get the benefits of it. Okay. Essentially, it says, hey, it's an aspect that could affect the efficacy of treatment in that real life situation, and how the FNM methodology over here would address a shortcoming of the first stage of the current methodology. All right. So what's the correct answer here? It is to illustrate a point about enrolling a wide variety of patients, as you guys got this. All right. Now, it does indicate why progressive diseases may require, a slightly different treatment. Now, whether it's at various stages or not. But again, it's not why, and it's again for a different example. There are two different examples that are put in over there. Uh, and so even if it were for the same example, the purpose of this is not why it's mentioned. It is to illustrate a point about why a larger trial is beneficial. Okay, so choice C, those of you who chose choice C, this is a purpose question. Why does someone do this? It's not to really educate you about the disease. It is to really tell you how the benefit of this could happen. For those of you who chose choice C, is that clear? People who chose choice C over here? And again, this one is the opposite. Again, you can really see when you see the incorrect answers, what do they do? How do they play with your mind? Okay. Now let's look at the last question. This is, I think, a question where not many of you got it right. So according to the passage, which are the following, this is a detailed question. According to the passage, is a detailed question. Which are the following describe the results of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials. And this is what I call as a wordsmith game that the official sometimes you would see. Not many a times, but only sometimes that you would really see. So uh, generally conduct clinical trials. So we have two instances. It could either be where they're collecting more data, or it could be where they're only enrolling patients who have just that ailment. Okay. So essentially what the author is asking is, per the passage, whether the following is an outcome of the current way in which trials are done. Okay. So again, the two things which we know is a lot more data is collected, and consequently you have more costs and then ideal conditions. So you need to take a two-step process, otherwise the application is limited. And when you think about this over here, if I remember, choice A is the right answer, which is they expend resources on storage of information, which is that storage is likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting, which is the correct answer. Now let me put in the poll, get the poll over here to really see which other option did you guys choose. Choice C uh, is a very popular option also. And choice C says they avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings. I'm going towards C. Sonam, Soham, uh, even though doing so raises their research cost. The, do they avoid the risk, or the risk still there? Do they avoid it as per the passage? It's still there. No, it's not. Don't go to the age. Age is second paragraph, but let me just go into the first paragraph over here. P3. Such risk never entirely eliminable. Never entirely eliminable. Can you guys see this part in bold? Can you see this in bold? Let me actually increase this over here as well. Let me take it back to 16 and remove bold for the next session, so that we don't have it like this. Oh no, it's not too strong. Let's kind of see why A is correct. They rarely say they expend resources on storage of information likely to be irrelevant while conducting. The passage really says that. Okay. We're gonna I'll show the passage to really say why A is correct. Uh, Let's kind of show the passage once again. P3. When you see over here, currently, remember, this is what the author is saying. Currently, researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. The author is saying that, thereby strictly required for their trials. Do you see this? If they collect more information than is required, then it is irrelevant. That's likely to be irrelevant, right? Yes, it's not a main point question. It's a detailed question. A main point has to go across the passage, not a detailed question. Yes, strictly required, yes. Which means for the trial if you need it. What does strictly required mean? What is B? They sometimes compromise the accuracy of their findings by collecting and analyze more information than is strictly required. No, how do they compromise the accuracy of findings? Where is accuracy of findings discussed when it comes to choice B? Can you tell me where's accuracy of findings discussed? Who doesn't correct a larger section of data? Where is accuracy discussed? Where is accuracy discussed? Not discussed. It says it leads to a two-step trial. A treatment just successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. That's the current way. It's not saying that treatment is inaccurate. Okay, accuracy is not discussed anywhere. If you're thinking accuracy in your brain, you're thinking beyond the scope of it, of this entire passage. Okay. Why is C wrong? We already discussed this for those of you, Indra, because they never avoid the risk. The risk is never entirely eliminable. Choice C says they avoid the risk. They don't. The author says that it's never. It is likely to be irrelevant. Likely to be irrelevant over here. The official answers are beautifully worded. Okay. So again, if you still have questions, please put them in the Q&A pod so that you don't, there are others who get this. Okay. I'm going to clear this over here. Focus on every word that is there in an answer choice. Choice D is a cause and effect. Choice D says, because they attempt to analyze too much information, they overlook facts that could emerge as relevant. It rarely combines information from paragraph 1 with paragraph 2. If you chose choice D, you are merging information from paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Okay, don't do that. Those are two independent pieces. Okay. In choice, he says, in order to approximate ideal the conditions typical of medical treatment, they base their methods of information collection based on those used. That's not the purpose. And the methods of information collection and why they've done this is not what's discussed in this passage. Okay. Indra says, if the resources are expended for storage and data collection, then aren't they likely to be irrelevant? Isn't the storage likely to be irrelevant overall? If A, B, and C are going to be wasted, then A is wasted as well, right? If you wasted engineering marketing and sales resources, then it can be said that you wasted engineering resources. I'm not saying you only wasted engineering resources. Right, Indra? If you wasted engineering, marketing, and technology and sales resources, then I can say you wasted engineering resources. Right? So in the same way, if yeah, if the resources are wasted for storage, data collection, and analysis, then yes, they were wasted for storage. Now, with regards to timing, let's talk about this. Let's talk about timing. Okay, and just to really tell you, I'm going to set some context. If you go and look at GMAT Club, you're going to find that we have about 1900 reviews, others don't. If you go to GMAT Club, share GMAT experience, click on tag as e-GMAT, you're going to find 10 pages of success stories out there. And the second best you're going to find is about 4.5 pages of success stories. Most prep companies have 2 pages of success stories. Each page has about 50 success stories, by the way. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see about 100 video interviews over there. If you go to most other test prep companies' YouTube channel, you're not going to see more than 10 video interviews. So the reason I'm telling you in the context of this is these stats, if they did not work, or these methods, if they did not work, those stats would not be present. Okay. So some of you are wondering, should I read slowly in a time test? Okay, why is it that how, I mean, you guys are telling me to read slowly, and how many of you find this recommendation surprising, or it's opposite of what you've heard? How many of you've heard that? Hey, this is something which I'm hearing for the first time. Read slowly on the GMAT where I'm worried about timing. Okay, and if you read slowly, well, it doesn't matter if it's too slow because you would become fast right away. Okay. Another thing that you're going to really see is, as a company, we've existed for 10 years and we still do just the GMAT. Most other prep companies do every other test. They do admission consulting, even though we know a whole lot of it. If you go and take a look at top instructors for the GMAT, 4 out of top 5 are from e-GMAT. And there are about 200 instructors who are rated over there. Okay, 4 out of top 5 are from GMAT. So let's talk about your timing concerns in GMAT RC. There are 2 ways in which you're going to read a passage. One is you read a passage quickly. You spend about 2 minutes reading a passage, and essentially then you spend about 1.5 minutes answering questions. So 1.5 minutes is 90 seconds. This is what it means. And if you do that, you're going to spend 8 minutes going through the passage. You will be stressed. You will make mistakes. If you do slow initial reading, the first 10 passages in the learning phase, you might take about 9 minutes reading a passage. Why? Because your brain still doesn't automatically recognize keywords. You're still not very sure about what does the author say, what does other people say. You're still not sure of it. But as you do this over 10, 12, 15 passages, you will get to a point where that reading slowly speed gets to about 3 minutes. We've had 50,000 students. We've seen this happen thousands of times. Okay, and we track close to 100 data points for you in GMAT RC, personal data points, and we give you feedback on those. Because you're able to read the passage and because you've comprehended the passage well, you need only about a minute to answer a passage, and that's got a question over there for most passages. If you get a difficult passage, you're going to take about 4 minutes to read that passage, but in a good chunk of difficult passages, it takes even less time to answer questions. Okay, and essentially you'd be able to finish a passage in about 7 minutes. All right, again, the time spent for that initial read is about 45% of your investment over there. Try following this approach. You're going to find your brain's a lot more calm. You're going to find as you solve more questions, you're going to get better. That time's going to improve. Your accuracy is going to improve. If you try and follow this approach, read the passage quickly, you're going to find you hit a wall. And we have so many students here. How many of you have tried that approach? How many of you have tried to read a passage fast and have stalled? Your accuracy doesn't seem to improve beyond a certain point, despite practicing again and again and again when you try this approach. How many of you have done that? Yes, it doesn't work. GMAT, whether it's quant or verbal, is not a test of speed. Okay, it's a test of ability. All right. So don't read fast. Spend more time understanding. Spend more time comprehending, and you'll solve less time answering questions. Here's an example of someone who scored 740, and this is the YouTube link to her interview, by the way. And he said you should read all the text, not only the first and last sentence of each paragraph or any other way. As long as you understand the whole paragraph, it only takes 30 to 50 seconds to answer each question. Then she says, the more you read, the greater is your skill. And she says, so I read all official passages and I brought a subscription to The Economist. And again, you read with a point of view of understand, analyze each part of the information, and read with what we call as the SC hat. Again, she learned from master comprehension, then she read from the SC hat. She improved her comprehension over here. Nishant, we talked about him earlier. He's the one who's graduating from Columbia. He says, what you have to realize is that you'd have enough time to cover all questions. Do not stress about timing. It takes 3+ minutes to read, understand, and comprehend a short passage, and 4+ minutes for a long passage. This strategy has that initial investment of time, but is great when you deal with questions. Using this strategy as answering RC questions in 45 to 60 seconds flat. Emma says, what's SC hat? SC hat is where you read a sentence and break it down into its fragments over there. It's something that we teach so that it's what we call as doing the sentence structure of a sentence. So that you can easily attribute which aspects correspond to which fragments of sentence. Okay. Here is Nishant's ESR, and you can really see he spent about 2 minutes per question or 8 minutes per passage. All right. One of the big things is it reduces the chaos. It not just gives you high accuracy, but it reduces chaos. Here's a guy, Rohit Malan, who scored 760. He'll be joining Kellogg. He actually also got a scholarship. He's a medical doctor by profession. And he scored V27 in his first attempt. And when he scored V27, he said, in case of reading comprehension, I was forced to read the passage multiple times for the reason I didn't understand it for the first time, as you guys have said. And he says after he learned all of those reading strategies, the need to read passages repeatedly in both CR and RC went down significantly. Okay. So how does a 90th percentile scorer approach RC? Let's look at that. The first thing you have to do is go through the master comprehension course, which is where we tell you how is a sentence built over here. How do you form long sentences? We start with a 2-word sentence and extend it to a 62-word sentence. Just to tell you how big is a 60-word sentence, the largest CR argument is about 90 words. Okay. So this is where we end up doing that over these 4s, and then we kind of tell you how do you deconstruct a long sentence and figure out its meaning. That's just one part of master comprehension. There are 4 or 5 modules in this course. Okay, then we teach you pause points. When you're reading a long sentence in master, where should you actually pause, and we evaluate you as well. Okay. Then we teach you how do you read an RC passage. We have reading strategies files, and then we evaluate your reading strategies over here. And you get feedback that's personalized to you. That's feedback which is right then and there given to you. Then you learn essentially your main points, and you've seen some of the main point files over there. Then you evaluate it on that main point. Then you look at other concepts which are there, such as inference, detail, purpose, overall. But the key thing which is there is, if you want to get to that 90th percentile, You've got to learn how to do this, which means initially when you're reading a passage, solving questions, you have to spend time on this. And I want to ask you, how many of you have actually spent 30 minutes on the main point concept? How many of you have done that? Good. Let's see how many more. How many don't know what that main point concept is? So if you've done that, you're doing the right thing. It's telling you where you need to improve. And if you've not done that, go take a look at that. Okay. But that investment in time helps build ability. When you build ability, that's when you save time. Okay. You go through those inference concepts over here, and again, you're evaluated. That's why you see the scores, which are, these 100% scores. So there's evaluation built in over here. These are not file completion, but these are scores, which means quiz scores over here. And then you go through application modules, and then you practice in Scholaranium, where you have upwards of 90 passages overall. And here again, you see the stats and as to how you do in easy, medium, and hard. And you can see the stats by humanities, social sciences, sciences, and business, and all sorts of passages. Is it the question that has a difficulty level on the real GMAT? Yes and no. It's a combination of questions and passages, both. So on the same passage, if you start doing poorly, you can get easier questions, but the passage has a certain difficulty level. This one is a stats for Rohit Malan, and you can really see how his accuracy in easy, medium, and hard questions, as well as the time to answer questions, was there. Now, here is the thing. Questions that he didn't understand, which is where we got them incorrect, is where he spent way more time. As you can see, this is more than 4 minutes. It's almost 4 minutes. But the ones that he understood, he got them in time. What it means is if you know how to solve a question, you'd solve it correctly. So if you successful students, they do these three things. They get immersed in the passage, they use reading strategies, and they look at data to really say, hey, where should they put their energy in? With that, I want to end this webinar. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. And let me hide this poll. Let me share the session PDF over here with you. So that you guys can download this. Here's the session PDF. And if you can give me some feedback on the session, put in your key takeaways, tell me how you like the session, that'd be great. As next steps, go and do the main point concepts. And again, remember, we have the quant workshop tomorrow and the RC webinar next week. If you've not registered for those, do register for those as well. The main point concept is part of your free trial. If you log into e-GMAT, you'd go to the free trial, you'd get to the main point concept. Again, if you've not registered for these sessions, do register for them. All right. One other thing that I want to really say is with the physical whiteboard now allowed on the GMAT, you guys should really consider taking the GMAT from home. For those of you who were able to get through this session, you would probably be able to take the GMAT at home. How many of you are aware that you can now use a real whiteboard? Let me just put in a yes no poll over here. How many of you are aware that you can now use a real whiteboard on GMAT at home? If you can put it, select yes if you are aware, select no if you're not. So you can now use a real whiteboard when taking the GMAT for home. So Let me just share a video that I created for taking the GMAT at home. So you can use your computer and mouse, yes. 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 Uh, you can watch this video if you have questions. I think I have about 40 questions that I've answered over here. So you can really look at those over here as well. And for those of you who want to know what kind of opportunities that exist after an MBA, here's a session that we hosted with the GMAT. We actually hosted this in Bangalore. You can see about 200 students over here, and you can see the representatives from the GMAT. How do you cope with calculations in quant with a whiteboard? This is a physical whiteboard, a real whiteboard, not the online whiteboard. So that you can really use now. So you can write numbers down with your hand. This is something that happened just yesterday. So watch this to really know the specifics of it. Do we have link to the master comprehension? The master comprehension course is a part of the free trial. It's part of the paid course. It's not a part of the free trial. And yes, you can have your own physical whiteboard. Yes, it has to be your own whiteboard. It's not going to be given to you by the GMAT overall. So, and the master comprehension course is a part of our verbal as well as GMAT online courses. Okay, and for those of you who want to really see how people have improved in RC, you can also watch some success stories over here. You want the link for video on the whiteboard? Okay. Here is the video on the whiteboard over here, Seema. All right. Okay, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me. Just as actually, I want to raise this. Can someone raise their IQ? You know, GMAT's frankly not about IQ. So for those of you who think it's about IQ, it's not. It's about your logical approach. And as long as, and most of us have enough gray matter to ace the GMAT. As long as you're willing to apply that gray matter, you're golden. Anubhav says, I'm eagerly waiting for centers to open up. Will they open before August? So Anubhav, based on the information that I have, centers have already started to open up. I mean, in India, there are a few centers that are already open. But the beauty of the problem with that is because of the restrictive measures, you won't get an appointment fairly easily. Okay, so do you foresee colleagues delaying their admission dates due to COVID-19? I've talked to a few people, and you know, as you go take a look at uh, these lists over here, you're going to find that some of those interviews are here. I'm also going to share some more playlists with you that I've shared with current students that I've conducted with current students. Let me just get in those playlists over here. By the way, we frequently conduct interviews with students who are former students but currently in business schools. Let me just see. Where are our interviews? Apparently they are not in a folder. Let me just go and get you my our from the videos. But essentially, we don't see very many students deferring their GMAT, frankly, based on what I've seen over here. So here's an example of one of the interviews that we conducted. Let's go here. Here is it. You can take a look at this. Due to economic issues, do USA colleges will they reduce scholarships? They are likely to reduce to a certain degree. Not top schools, but tier 2 schools definitely. I think that's where the GMAT score becomes even more important. They're going to reduce some scholarships, but Harvard, Stanford, top schools have enough endowment money to cover this. So yeah. How many months do you require to prepare if you're a beginner? So we actually help people prepare their study plans. So if you need someone, if you're someone who needs to figure out how many months you need, you can schedule some time over here, and we'll for each one of you we can really help you create a personalized study plan. And we can tell you if you put in these many hours per day, this is how long you're going to take. Are colleges delaying their dates for intake? So what's happening right now is a lot of colleges are starting delaying by about 2 to 3 weeks, but they're starting more or less on at the same time. But because of visa issues, international students are doing the most of a semester online, and they're hoping for U.S. embassies to open up worldwide and European embassies to open up worldwide, so that then they join in second semester. And that's kind of what most of the students who I've spoken to are considering. We expect most people to study 2 to 3 hours per day on the weekdays and about 4 hours per day on the weekend, no more than 4 hours per day. Okay. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and I wish you good luck, and I hope to see many of you on egmat.com.